Hey, welcome class. Today I'm going to use Google Earth to go over important facts about our border with Mexico. So I'm going to zoom in, zoom out, get very close to the mountains, valleys, deserts, and click along these sister cities that are side by side on our border with Mexico. So I wanted to start here with Tijuana and San Diego because Tijuana and San Diego reflects a little bit of all the problems that happens along this 2,000-mile border region. Most of you who took Chicano Studies 101 or 102, you learned that this border that we have was established in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848. But I do not want to go back in 1848. I want to talk about more of our contemporary border because that's the one that we are dealing with at this very moment. So I wanted to zoom in into our border region here in California and more specifically in San Diego and Tijuana. The border was more established in relation of how these two nations were thinking about coordinating, and it was done in el Acuerdo de la Paz, the La Paz Agreement in 1983, where they were looking to come up with solutions that deals with the environment, that deals with crime, that deals with the economics of the region, and we continue to do so as this border becomes more together, more integrated, is something that is a part of a natural flow when you have two mega cities side by side. And the fence that we have, this border fence, is really an inconvenience when it comes down, for example, to the environment. Right now we're dealing with COVID. We have a massive flow of people from both sides because whether we like it or not, a lot of people who live in Tijuana and who live along this border region are also U.S. citizens. So our border region right here with San Diego and Tijuana, you're looking at a population of over 7 million people, and that's big. The border right now, in terms of length, and let me zoom out, it goes all the way from Texas, right here, this yellow dot is the border, and that's Brownsville, Matamoros, Brownsville in the US, Matamoros in Mexico, the state of Tamaulipas. So I'm just going over these little sister cities because the definition of these sister cities, it means that they rely on each other in terms of economic, and not only in economic, there's a long history of culture that goes along in this city. So we have 2,000-mile border that stretches all the way to Playas de Tijuana, and that's in Tijuana, San Diego, our region right here, and that's our main sister city that we do business with, that we cannot be separated because then it will hurt both at the same time. I wanted to zoom in again and let me get closer to El Muro. This is in Playas de Tijuana. Let me get closer to it. Because right here, not only these two cities, like I mentioned before, they're well connected, they're also a whole world of controversies when it comes down to the border fence. This border fence that I'm going to zoom in a little bit is connected to the politics of the US because for about 4 decades since the Bill Clinton administration, they started to develop and build more wall. Probably all of you can remember what President Trump does, how he started his political campaign that he wanted to build a beautiful wall. So let me zoom in and get you to the border wall that we have in Playas because that is one of the beginning of reinforcing this border that we have right here. Let me get closer to it and then we can see how this region is completely divided right here in Tijuana and San Diego by this border fence. El muro means the wall. I'm trying to get closer. Maybe I can just click right here on this little pen and get closer to it. And now we see part of the fence that plunges into the ocean. Let me get closer. A little bit more. We have a better picture right here. And this is Friendship Park. That's the international and famous Friendship Park. And it's really famous because since 1970, this park that I'm going to zoom in more, this circle that you see right here, which is Parque de la Amistad, was done with intentions to not separate families, but unify families and friends. Every Saturday between 10 a.m. in the morning and 2 p.m. there's a gate right here, and maybe I can get closer to that gate. It's a rolling gate that allows people to go through. And let me go, if the map allows me to move, that would be awesome. This is part of the fence that plunges into the ocean. We saw it from above. And right here, good, this is the rolling gate. Border agents, they open this gate, people go through it, and right here at this part of the fence, this in between is known as no man's land. That's where friends and family, they meet with people from Mexico. And it has been happening since this border wall have been erected. Now this first wall that we see right here, the one that I like to call, is made out of columns. That was the one established by Bill Clinton in something that was labeled as Operation Gatekeeper. Because by the 1990, 93, 94, kind of coincides with NAFTA, the beginning of the free trade agreement of these two regions. I don't know if you notice, there's so much wall, but I'm going to zoom in to Peace Arch, which is at the other side, that's in Canada, and let's see if they have a border fence there. Let's fly really fast. Let's take our plane. There we are. Here we are in Peace Arch. That's the border between Canada and the US. And what you notice is that there's no border right here. And the reason why is because there's no reason for them to have a border wall. Why? You might wonder. Perhaps because both economics are level and they don't have to worry about people coming across and the stereotypes that Mexico will come and they steal the jobs of the Americans. That's something that has become a part of the rhetoric used by many politicians, especially the presidency of Donald Trump. He called it as an invasion. Mexicanos have been invading the US. So I just wanted to see this and how we have no border wall in Canada, but we have this massive wall infrastructure put in place with Mexico. All right, let's fly back to San Diego and Tijuana, and let's look at this border more closely, because I wanted to take you along the landscape. You notice that there is nothing, and this is done on purpose. They left this park barren. There's no development, and the reason why is because at one point before 1994 there were so many people coming across on this region. So I wanted to go to the main, let me zoom out a little bit, and let's go to the main port of entry. because this is really, really interesting. This is right here, close to Zona Rio. That's a really nice part of town of Tijuana. And we have San Isidro port of entry, which is the busiest border crossing on earth. So there's about, if I'm not mistaken, and if I have my numbers right, there's about close to 48 million carts that crosses every year, and about 70 million people that crosses right in this part of the border. So getting closer, it's like think about we're flying a drone or you're flying on a helicopter, but this is how you enter. These are the lanes, and then you have about 27 lanes that are open. And notice there's border fence continued. I feel that most of the region between San Diego and Tijuana, it is completely covered by the border fence. During President Trump, he managed to, I wanted to say to refurbish, to knock down the old fence and build a fence that was taller. And it's not that he was building a new wall, as he just took down the old wall and added another wall. So many people think that that was a waste, and we can talk about that later. But so right here you have the busiest border crossing on the planet. Sometimes when we think about having a border fence, we think that the people in Tijuana are just all Mexicans. No, they're not. A lot of them they have dual citizenship, and they rather live in Tijuana because it's cheaper in comparison to the rent or buying a house in San Diego. As we're talking right now, playas, for example, is really popular because there's a lot of people from the US, especially many millennials who have moved because rent in Tijuana is cheaper. So they take advantage of something called century lanes. People pay more money so they can speed up their process when they come across through special lanes. And there's so many different lanes when you're coming across. Let's see if we can. This is called ready lanes. That's also you pay a little bit more money. They give you a car, and with this car you can enter these lanes are called ready. And then you also have the century lane that are supposed to be the fastest one. I have one, and there are times that takes about 10 minutes, and there are other times that when the border is really packed and you ended up waiting close to 40 minutes. You also have pedestrian bridges along this border wall, so it is very congested. It is once again the busiest border crossing on the planet, and when you have a region of about 7 million people, then you have to deal with a lot of problems. There are actually high schools built right on the border that caters the community of Tijuana. You have a lot of these kids who are US citizens, but they live in Tijuana, and they commute and they go to San Diego to go to school. This border has become more integrated in the sense of there's right now let me see if I can zoom in right here, by all time, and I'm going to go, this is the international airport in Tijuana, and right here there's a bridge. They built a US terminal, and there's a bridge that connects to the Tijuana airport. This is how this region is well connected. Right here, the Garita, the old time, and this is where we have the maquila industry. It's part of the old NAFTA, the free trade agreement, and through this part of the region between San Diego and Tijuana, you have a lot of the trucks that bring all the goods that are being assembled in Tijuana and taken into the US. Let me see if I can get closer, and you can see this is the other border port of entry right here. It's smaller, obviously, but and then on this side right here you have all these trucks, and this is part of the NAFTA. This is Mexico border control, and look, all these trucks come into the US bringing goods. You're talking about thousands and thousands daily. So the economics, when it comes down to NAFTA, is a $1 billion industry. This is not, we're not talking about thousands of dollars, and that's why we can never neglect any of these two cities because they're so connected that it's almost impossible to think about them separately. We can't. So I wanted to go back to 1994 when the US established so many operations that went along the border between the US and Mexico. And I mentioned to you that in 1994 we have Operation Gatekeeper right here in Tijuana and San Diego. And the border operation was intended to stop the massive flow of undocumented coming across just right here between this part of the town, and it resulted that migrants were pushed to go into the mountains and the deserts, and they were dying because in the summer it's really hot, extreme heat kills them, and in the winter the temperatures also are cold, and a lot of them were dying of hypothermia, and they continue to die because the people continue to try to come across because the border wall has been fortified and has been, I wanted to say, double up in size. Also, manpower, drums. This is almost like a war song right here. It looks very surreal. And I wanted to also talk about globalization because 1994, when we are embracing NAFTA, this free trade agreement, at the same time we wanted to transform the cities into economic centers, but we don't want any of them to come across. Only goods are allowed, but not humans. So I wanted to go and zooming into Jacumba, and that's part of the border that we have. There's actually a border wall right here, and that was done in 1994 in the middle of the desert. The problem with having a border wall on this part of the region, even though you see there's almost nothing there, then the only thing that really gets affected is the wildlife when they try to come across. And as we're talking about, Sierra Club have sued the US government for all the impact, the negative impact that have caused on the environment on this part of the border. And not only on this part of the border, but if I actually go to the Big Bend National Park, I know President Trump wanted to put a wall right in the middle of this beautiful park that there is nothing around it. Who's gonna come across through this Big Bend National Park where there's nothing? There's not even this Ojinaga right here that is closer to Big Bend. This is a Native American reservation. This is actually part of the region where we have a lot of the tribes that were divided and split by our border wall. Let's go back to Calexico. I'm gonna go back from sister city to sister city really briefly. And we can see Calexico being very small. This part of the region right here in California, look, the mass agro business that takes place in this part of El Centro. It's almost closer to the border with Arizona. And you have Mexicali, which is the sister city in Mexico. Continue with our virtual tour using Google satellite images, and let's go to the next sister city, which is in Nogales, en Nuevo Nogales, right in here. So most of these cities, once again, in Nogales, Nuevo Nogales, there's a lot of maquilas, these multinational companies, alongside that function the same way as I show you between Tijuana and San Diego. Let's go to Ciudad Juarez, which that city has been very controversial because of the crime, the drugs, the cartels. There's so many movies done in this city, and it's really interesting because the other side, which is El Paso, the city of El Paso, if you compare crime there, it's almost none in relation to Ciudad Juarez. Why? It's one of the biggest problems that we have to deal with the border, and that is the smuggling of drugs. You see that in the news, you see that in movies, and El Paso and Ciudad Juarez became so controversial. There was one point that Ciudad Juarez was labeled as the most dangerous city in the world because of the high crime due to the cartels. Let's go to let's go to Nuevo Laredo. In Nuevo Laredo, that's where most of the trucks goes through on this region. It is probably one of the most traffic region in the sense of a lot of the trucks that goes with all the products that are assembled in Nuevo Laredo and they go into Laredo. So once again, I want you to understand that these cities are so connected. And this is part of the region where I forgot to mention most of them are divided, and they are actually not most of them, they're all divided by Rio Grande. So Rio Grande becomes the natural landscape you see right here, Rio Grande, that divides the two countries. See, all this is from Ciudad Cuna, Nuevo Laredo, we go to Reynosa, McAllen, Matamoros. This is all divided by the Rio Grande and Rio Grande or Rio Grande River. And that's where you have the derogatory term of wetback, because people have to swim across Rio Grande to make it into the US. So in terms of width, in terms of how wide this corridor is, you have 100 miles in both sides of the border. And that's what is known as the 100-mile border zone that really goes around the periphery of the US. And there was a court case that really defined this 100-mile border zone. It was right here in San Clemente, California. There was one of the checkpoints. Let's see if I can get closer to it. And Encinitas, Carlsbad, and right here there was a guy who was smuggling two people from Tijuana, and by the time he got to San Clemente, he got pulled over in one of those border checkpoints and he got caught. But he sued the US in the grounds that they were violating his 14th Amendment. And then the Supreme Court decided that they had the right to check anyone within this 100-mile border zone. Now, the 100-mile border zone extends along the US. Not funny. People don't like to be having to go through those checkpoints because of traffic. We have them all over on the Highway 8, on the 15, all over the US. And if I go around the US, and if you look, we have a 100-mile border checkpoints along the periphery of the US that really affects 2/3 of the population of the US. And that's how you see a lot of these YouTube videos where people refuse to tell the border agents where they're coming from. They do have the right to ask you whether you bring from Mexico, or even if you're just going through one of those checkpoints, they have the right to ask about your status. If they wanted to search your car, then it's a little bit problematic because they will have to have a search warrant to get into your car, but they do have the right to have this checkpoint. That's a little bit of how big this border wall is, how controversial it is, how these twin cities are so connected, and at the same time we think that that having a border is just it's the people from there. No, it doesn't work that way. And more today, where we live in a global world, we the problems that affect the region of the border region really is going to have an impact, a direct impact in the US. And that's what a lot of people who live really far away from the border do not understand the dynamics of this border region. I just wanted to stop right here. This is my introduction of the border. I hope you enjoy. Take care.